Yeah, and so the breadth of that audit experience at KPMG really taught me about um, auditing as a business, as a practice, and the role that auditing and accounting has in creating systems of accountability and transparency to different stakeholder groups. So, um, kind of building on that foundation of understanding what accountability means to different stakeholder groups, I have been in recent years been more fascinated by the ESG, the emergence of this new area, not necessarily just in accounting, but the ESG standards that have emerged as a byproduct of the transition from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And so that is why I'm interested in pursuing a PhD. Um, as an academic researcher, I'll be able to produce more meaningful and impactful research that is inclusive and covers a very wide range of technical areas across the environmental, social, and governance spectrum/ecosystem. And it relates to my particular focus areas that I'm interested in, and why I chose accounting in particular is because of its particular relationship to corporate governance, information disclosure, and financial market behavior. So, understanding how boards are performing and conducting their risk assessments to change their strategy to really transform their view on value creation and their view of value to each of the different stakeholder groups. I think that there's a lot of interesting areas to be explored within corporate governance. With regards to information disclosure, as ESG becomes more regulated and and how accounting standards are implemented, so specifically with the IFRS S1 and S2, the new sustainability rules, how those new rules will affect what companies disclose and how those disclosures affect how investors and how the market responds to what gets disclosed is of particular interest to me. And then overall, just like financial market behavior and in terms of what new products emerge, the proxy voting that is associated with what the new incentives are as companies shift their transition from shareholder capitalism over to stakeholder capitalism. And so by exploring ESG through those three lenses, I'll be able to conduct research that is meaningful in that particular area, but I'll also be trained in more classical research areas that are not just limited to ESG. So I'm particularly interested in looking at corporate governance, information disclosure, and financial market behavior. So my individual background, so I mentioned I started my career at KPMG, but outside of that, some of the other areas that I'm interested that kind of have shaped my view on this ESG area and topic, and why I feel like I be a great academic researcher within the accounting space is I've worked in public finance. So once I left KPMG, I joined the DC Public Charter School Board, where I served as a public administrator, analyzing school financial performance, governance, and oversight of 60 plus charter schools, individual nonprofits, and coaching their boards on what effective governance looks like and what that means. In addition to that, I also worked on two district-wide cross-functional task forces to conduct research on school funding equity, meaning how does the DC school, how does the DC government allocate funding in an equitable way? And so I think that area in particular is of interest to me because in addition to practicing accounting, I've also been in the diversity and inclusion, talent and acquisition role. So understanding how to foster an inclusive profession, what that really means. And so thinking through and understanding how, or leaning on that experience, I feel like I'll be able to contribute some interesting ways in which policies, understanding policy models that could be leveraged in implementing new ways of thinking into accounting and accounting risk assessment and all of the nuances that exist that I think this ESG kind of lends itself to. I'm particularly interested in exploring California, the new California legislation as well. So the Senate Bill 253 and the Senate Bill 251. So what those state legislatures have regulated in terms of how businesses conducted and what information gets disclosed. So at a more nuanced level, what Scope 3 emissions means, and ultimately how the government is going to monitor that information to track progress towards net zero, and interpreting that information such that it gets aggregated to inform federal policies and really kind of get to a more sustainable practice of business. And so lastly, I did speak about the environmental piece, the social piece, and then the governance piece. As a small business owner and individual practitioner, I've worked with a number of different entity types. So from the sole proprietors to the partnerships, C corporations, S corporations, I've seen a lot across my throughout my 8 years of practicing. So I know that ESG has an impact on each of those individual businesses, business structures, and in how those businesses are structured. They each have different economic incentives. So how does ESG kind of shift the incentives on how each of those businesses are governed, how they are operated, and what does it mean in terms of the overall ecosystem and the capital market behavior itself? So overall, I think I'd be a great candidate. I'm super excited, and I'm looking forward to submitting my application. Thanks.